Daniel Brooks was used to driving through bad weather with the wipers squeaking and his 8-year-old daughter snoring in the back seat. But tonight, the downpour turned the supermarket parking lot into a shimmering mess of puddles and headlights. And that was the only reason he saw her. Near the cart return, under a buzzing light, a wheelchair sat crooked, facing nothing. A young woman curled into herself in the seat, hoodie soaked through, dark hair plastered to her cheeks. No umbrella, no coat, no car idling nearby. Just her shivering. Daniel slowed, eyes narrowing. This wasn't someone waiting for a late Uber. Her lips were pale, her hands clenched on the armrests, like she was trying not to cry. From behind him, a sleepy voice piped up. "Daddy, why is she out there?" Mia leaned against her booster seat window, stuffed fox pressed to the glass. When Daniel stepped out into the rain and crossed toward the wheelchair, the girl flinched like she expected to be yelled at or pushed out of the way. Instead, he crouched so his eyes were level with hers and said quietly, "Hey, I'm Daniel. Do you need help? Or are you in danger?" She hesitated, then told him a name that would change everything. Long before he knew why people with that name could ruin his entire life with one phone call. Before we start, tell us in the comments. Where are you watching from? The girl stared at him like he'd just spoken another language. For a heartbeat, Daniel wondered if she'd even heard him over the storm and the hiss of tires at the edge of the lot. Then her shoulders hunched tighter, as if she could fold herself into the thin hoodie clinging to her frame. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice cracked halfway through. "You should just go." Daniel's shirt was already sticking to his back, but he didn't move. He knew that brittle tone, the sound of someone who'd run out of safe places to put their hurt. Behind him, Mia leaned out of the open car door, clutching her stuffed fox. "Daddy," she whispered, "she's shaking." The girl's fingers tightened on the chair's armrests. She darted one quick look at Mia, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, then stared down at her wet jeans. "It's not her problem," she muttered. "Maybe it's mine then," Daniel said, keeping his voice soft. "I'm Daniel. That's Mia. What's your name?" The question hung between them. He could almost see her weighing it, risk against the simple need to be seen. "Harper," she said finally. "Harper Lane." "Hi, Harper Lane," Mia said, the words wobbly but brave. "We've got blankets at home and soup." A ghost of a smile tugged at Harper's mouth. "I can't just go home with strangers," she said, "even nice ones." "You're right," Daniel said. "So let's start simple. Where's your ride?" Harper's jaw worked. She glanced toward the supermarket's glass doors. Through the reflections, Daniel picked out a tall man in a dry wool coat and a woman in heels, both arguing with the customer service clerk. The man's gestures were sharp and impatient. The woman barely looked up from her phone. "Them," Harper said quietly. "They said I was making a scene. If I wanted attention so badly, I could sit out here and have it." Mia gasped so hard her fox squeaked. "That's mean," she blurted, then shrank back as though expecting trouble. "It is," Daniel agreed, heat rising in his neck. "How old are you, Harper?" 21. She lifted her chin like it should disqualify her from sympathy. "I should be able to deal with it." "You should never have to deal with being dumped in a storm," he said. "Do you live with them?" She hesitated, then nodded. "He's my stepfather. The woman's his wife. They like reminding me what they've spent on me, like the chair's a leash I should thank them for." Daniel's stomach turned. He'd seen ugly before, at the garage, in custody hearings when his divorce went bad, in the way people talked when they thought kids weren't listening. This was a familiar kind of ugly. Power used like a weapon, hidden under polite smiles and receipts. "Okay," he said slowly. "I'm going to call this in, all right?" He pulled his phone from his pocket. "We'll ask the police for a welfare check. Tell them how we found you." Harper's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. "Please don't," she choked. "If they get dragged into it, I'm the one who pays later." Rain ran down his arm where she held on. Her pupils were huge, the panic there deeper than bad weather. "Harper, if you're in danger, not the kind anyone can see," she cut in. "No bruises, just rules, curfews, threats to cancel my treatments if I act ungrateful, and anyone who tries to help gets steamrolled." A car rolled past, spraying dirty water over his shoes. Daniel barely noticed. In his head he saw Mia years from now, stranded somewhere, telling herself she didn't want to cause trouble. Mia edged closer, staying behind his leg like they'd practiced in busy car parks. "Daddy," she whispered. "If that was me, you'd want someone to help, right?" The question hit harder than the rain. He could bundle Mia back into the car, drive home, and convince himself he'd done his part. He could protect their small, fragile life and ignore the knot in his chest every time he thought about this parking lot. Or he could step into the line of fire with his eyes open. Daniel met Harper's gaze. "All right," he said. "We won't call the police. Not yet." Harper let out a shaky breath. Mia's fingers tightened around his hand. "So what now?" Harper asked. Daniel looked toward the glass doors one last time at the man who still hadn't noticed the empty wheelchair. His jaw set. "Now," he said, quietly, "we get you warm and dry. And then you're going to tell me exactly who those people are, and why they think they can treat you like this." Harper swallowed. "You really don't know who they are, do you?" "No," Daniel said. "Should I?" She gave a hollow little laugh. "If you did, you'd already be running." Harper's words buzzed in Daniel's head all the way home. He'd wrapped her in his spare hoodie, helped her into the back seat beside Mia, then folded the wheelchair into the boot. Surprised by how practiced his hands felt. He'd been doing some version of this his whole life. Lifting heavy things, making room where there wasn't any. Pretending it was easy. Now, in the dim living room of his small apartment, the storm a dull roar against the windows, Harper sat on his old sofa, a towel draped over her shoulders. Mia fussed over a steaming mug of cocoa on the coffee table. "Careful," Mia said. "It's hot. Daddy always forgets and burns his tongue." Daniel snorted from the tiny kitchen. "One time," he called. It happened one time. Harper watched them with a look he recognized from other people's kids at school events. The look of someone staring at a life they didn't quite believe was real. "You sure this is okay?" she asked softly. "I don't want to mess things up for you." "Pretty sure that ship sailed when I dragged a stranger in a wheelchair into my car," Daniel said, carrying over a small bowl of packet noodles. "Eat, you're shaking." She wrapped her hands around the mug instead. "You really don't know who they are." "Your stepfather?" Daniel asked. "Beyond selfish idiot, no." Something like disbelief crossed her face. "His name is Richard Lane," she said slowly. "Lane, as in Lane Mobility. As in the company that probably manufactured the lifts at your work and half the wheelchairs in this town." The noodles nearly slid out of Daniel's hand. "You're serious?" Harper nodded. "He married my mum when I was 5. When I got sick and needed the chair, he turned it into a brand story. Look how we care about access. Look how we support Harper." Her smile went brittle. Great marketing. Not such a great childhood. Daniel sank into the armchair opposite her, mind racing. He'd seen the Lane Mobility logo everywhere. Hospitals, clinics, even on the pamphlet that came with the ramp installed at Mia's school last year. Their CEO was on billboards, in glossy magazine interviews, polished, untouchable. And tonight? He asked. This was, what? Discipline? This was about control, Harper said. I told him I'd spoken to a lawyer about my trust. He didn't like that. She stared at the cocoa. So he reminded me who pays for everything and how fast it could all disappear. Can it? Mia asked quietly from the floor, where she'd started lining up colored pencils. Disappear? Harper glanced at Daniel, as though asking permission to answer honestly. He gave a tiny nod. There's money my mom left in a trust, Harper said. Richard manages it until certain conditions are met. He says I'm not responsible enough yet, so he keeps guiding me. I say I'd rather not be stranded in car parks as a life lesson. And the woman with him? Daniel asked. Vanessa, his very stylish, very bored wife. Harper's mouth twisted. She does most of the sneering while he handles the threats. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. So, just to be clear, I picked a fight with a billionaire tonight. Multimillionaire, Harper corrected. The billionaire is his father. But yes, you scooped up the family embarrassment and brought her home. That won't play well in the Lane house. Mia looked between them, eyes wide. Is he going to be mad at you? Oh, he's already mad at me, Harper said. He'll be furious at you. That's comforting, Daniel muttered. His phone vibrated on the side table. Unknown number. He didn't move to answer it. The buzzing cut off and then started again immediately. Voicemail icon. Text. Harper's shoulders slumped. That'll be him. He probably tracked my chair. Tracked your... There's a chip in it, she said. He calls it a safety feature. Really, it's a leash. Mia's nose wrinkled. That's creepy. Yeah, Daniel said. It is. The phone buzzed again, this time flashing a message preview he couldn't ignore. Return Harper to the store now. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Daniel stared at the words, a cold weight settling in his stomach. His world was school lunches and overdue bills and oil-stained overalls. Richard Lane's world was legal teams and shareholders and glossy PR. He could back down, drive Harper back, apologize, pretend tonight never happened. Or he could keep the promise he'd made in that parking lot. Harper, he said, you mentioned a lawyer, someone who isn't him. She nodded slowly. My mom's old attorney. She retired, but her son took over the practice. I emailed them last week. He wanted to meet, but Richard shut it down. Daniel picked up his phone again, thumb hovering. Call him, he said. Tell him you're safe, but you need advice. And if Richard wants you back so badly, he can meet us somewhere with witnesses. Harper swallowed. You don't have to do this. Pretty sure I do, Daniel said. If I let a man like that scare me off, what am I teaching Mia? Mia straightened, as if included in some secret club. We're not scared, she said, though her small voice trembled. Harper took a breath and unlocked her own mobile with damp fingers. As she dialed, Daniel's phone lit up again, this time with a new message. A photo. His car outside the building, his number plate, time-stamped just minutes ago. Harper saw his face and went pale. What is it? Daniel turned the screen so she could see. Looks like Richard Lane already knows exactly where you are, he said. And if that was true, Daniel realized, then someone with a lot more power than him was already on their way. Daniel double-checked the chain on his door, even though it wouldn't matter much against someone with money and lawyers. Old habits. Do what you can with what you've got. Harper's conversation with the attorney had been short but focused. The young man on the other end, Oliver Grant, hadn't sounded surprised to hear Richard's name. Annoyed, yes. Worried, yes. Shocked, no. "We've been waiting for this," Oliver had said. "If Richard makes contact tonight, don't argue. Don't sign anything. Ask him to meet you tomorrow at our office at 11. We'll handle the rest." Now, with Mia asleep on the pull-out sofa and Harper propped up with cushions, Daniel sat on the edge of the coffee table, elbows on his knees. "You're sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Walking into a lawyer's office with him?" Harper gave a tired half-smile. "I'm tired of being afraid of my own life," she said. "If there's a chance to change it, I'm taking it. You don't have to come." "Yeah, I do," Daniel said. "You showed up in my storm. That makes you my storm too." The next morning came too fast. Rain had faded to a cold, gray brightness. Daniel dropped Mia at school with an extra tight hug, then changed into his cleanest shirt and the only blazer he owned. It nearly hid the oil stain on his cuff. Harper watched him from the passenger seat as he loaded her chair into the boot again. "You know he could make trouble for you," she said. "Your job. Your apartment." "He can try," Daniel said. "I've had landlords scarier than any corporate executive." That was a lie, but it made her smile. Oliver Grant's office was in a renovated brick building downtown, all glass doors and brushed metal. Daniel felt grimy just walking across the lobby. He held the door for Harper and was still steadying her when the receptionist looked up. "Miss Lane?" she asked. Harper nodded. "He's coming," she added, quieter. "He won't be late." Oliver met them in the waiting area, a man in his early 30s with rolled-up sleeves and tired eyes. He shook Harper's hand first, then Daniel's. "Thank you for getting her out of there last night," Oliver said. "That took guts." "Mostly it took bad timing at the supermarket," Daniel said. "What exactly are we walking into?" "A trustees meeting," Oliver said. "Richard thinks he called it to scare Harper. In reality, he triggered clauses in your mother's trust that bring in an independent review. My firm represents that review, and someone else wanted to be here." "Someone else?" Harper frowned. Before Oliver could answer, the glass doors swung open. Richard Lane walked in like he owned the oxygen in the room. Dark coat, perfect tie, expression carved from stone. Vanessa glided at his side, scent of expensive perfume preceding her. Behind them, two men in plain suits took up positions by the wall, security not quite hiding it. Daniel's heartbeat kicked up. He stepped slightly closer to Harper's chair without thinking. "There you are," Richard said, voice smooth and dangerous. "You had us worried, Harper." "By worried, he means furious," Vanessa added with a thin smile. "Running off with strangers in the middle of the night? Honestly, it's childish." Harper's hands tightened on the wheels. "You left me in a car park," she said, "in a storm." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We needed a moment to calm down after your outburst. We always come back for you, don't we?" His gaze flicked to Daniel. "And you must be the mechanic who thought it wise to insert himself into private family matters." Daniel felt every difference between them, the cheap shirt, the second-hand shoes, the calluses on his hands. He swallowed anyway. "She was alone," he said. "That stopped being private when you abandoned her." Oliver cleared his throat. "We're not here to debate last night's choices," he said. "This meeting is about the administration of the Lane Family Medical Trust. established by the late Margaret Lane. For the first time, Richard's composure shifted. There is nothing wrong with how I've managed that trust. That, Oliver said, is what today will determine. They moved into the conference room. Long table, too much glass and chrome, a city view that made Daniel feel both small and weirdly weightless. Harper positioned herself at one end. Richard took the other, Vanessa beside him. Daniel stayed near Harper's shoulder, feeling like he'd stepped into someone else's life. On the wall, a framed photograph showed an older man shaking hands with a hospital director. Lane Mobility logo in the corner. The caption named him Edward Lane, founder, billionaire. A new voice spoke from the doorway. And I'd very much like to hear how my granddaughter has been treated. Everyone turned. Edward Lane stepped into the room, leaning on a discreet cane, eyes sharp behind his glasses. The tension in Richard's shoulders snapped tight. "Dad," Richard said slowly. "You weren't scheduled to." "I amended my schedule," Edward replied. "Margaret's trust allowed it. Sit down." Harper stared, stunned. "Granddad, I didn't know you were..." "Kept out of the loop," Edward finished. "Yes, that seems to be a pattern." He rested a hand lightly on Harper's chair for a moment, a quiet, steadying touch, then looked at Daniel. "And you must be Mr. Brooks," he said. "The man who stopped to help when my son did not." Daniel's mouth went dry. "I just couldn't drive past," he managed. Edward nodded once. "Good. We're going to need that kind of spine today." He turned to Oliver. "Let's begin. Start with last night's incident. Then we'll move on to the parts Richard neglected to mention. The tracking chip, the threats about her treatment, and exactly how many times he's used my granddaughter as a marketing prop." Richard went white. In that moment, Daniel understood. This wasn't just a family argument. This was a reckoning. And somehow, a broke single dad from a small apartment had become central to it. Outside, traffic hummed. Inside, the air felt heavy with money, secrets, and the possibility that everything in Harper's life, and maybe Daniel's, was about to be rewritten. He squeezed the back of Harper's chair gently. She drew a breath, lifted her chin, and began to speak. By the time she finished, the truth would leave him more stunned than any storm ever could, and open a door he'd never imagined standing in front of.